So I entitled this video Presuppositional Thomism, and some people might kind of go raise an eyebrow to that because oftentimes these two terms or two schools of thought are pitted against one another as though they cannot exist together. But I want to make this video because I made a post on my Facebook earlier today, and I said presuppositionalism gave me a justification for my reason. Thomism gave me the glorious fruit of that reason. And I want to expound on what I mean because I truly believe that both of these schools of thought are simply glorious and simply wonderful. But I do believe that there are areas where on their own they have deficiencies. Maybe that's a good word for it. Deficiencies in areas if they are not joined together in one big apologetic family. And so my argument starts with the fact that it was presuppositionalism that put legs on my faith. And what I mean by that is this. As I was growing up and starting to wrestle with a lot of the deeper philosophical questions that a lot of teenagers wrestle with, you start to look around and go, okay, I exist. Why do I exist? Why do things exist? Why is there something instead of nothing? All of these different things. And for me, starting without a concept of presuppositionalism, I had to ultimately put God on trial and weigh the evidence either in favor of him or against him. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Let's look at the evidence and find out. And so when I started to do this and started to look at the evidence, it ultimately came down to a point where I realized, gosh, a lot of this is just me having to take my best guess. And that didn't feel very convincing. Because even if you take a lot of these very wonderful Thomistic arguments for the existence of God, I'm thinking specifically of the 5 most commonly known, there's still people out there that put holes into it. Now, I don't think that they're able to do it well, but there are still people out there that believe that those arguments have deficiencies. So what do you do with those arguments? Well, you just have to kind of pick one. Which one's better? And it kind of almost becomes a Pascal's wager type idea, you know, which probability, it's going to be a safer bet to go with this one. And I didn't want to live that way. I wanted to have an assurance that went beyond a philosophical, reasonable assurance that was provided with more of a Thomistic philosophy. And that's when I came across presuppositionalism. And what presuppositionalism did almost immediately, thank you to Jake Beal if he watches this, he was the guy who introduced it to me actually on a podcast on my channel. Prior to that, I had never heard of it, had no clue. You can go watch that video, see my ignorance on full display. But it was through him kind of showing me, immediately I went, oh my goodness. My ability to reason, to use logic, to weigh evidence, to assume that there's objectivity, uniformity, all of those things presume something that requires God. Listen, if we're living in a universe, and the universe just is, the universe, it cannot give way by logical necessity. It cannot give way to order. An unordered evolutionary universe that just does, just chemicals in motion, molecules in motion, it cannot give way, by definition, to reason, logic, and all these things. And even if you say, yes, it does because we use these things, you cannot provide a justification as to why the things that you're using make sense. And that was the thing that presuppositionalism just punched me in the face with too, is basically you cannot justify why these things work unless you assume and presuppose the existence of God. And even using this method, you're able to whittle away all other religions down to the monotheistic religions, whittle even further down to Christianity. And so this apologetic form was amazing for me. It provided a justification for my reason. It provided a justification for my morality. It provided a justification for why things are the way that they are. And I found it to be completely bulletproof against every other worldview. I listened to Greg Bonson versus Gordon Stein, and I was blown away by how it just knocks the legs off of any other worldview. Gordon Stein had nothing to say because he could not justify why he was using the things he was using. The only thing he could really do was just point out that Greg Bonson wasn't engaging in an evidential type way. And Greg Bonson just kept showing him, listen, until you provide me the justification for why you, using your worldview, trust things like reason, there is no debate. I've won the debate. And I just found it to be so fascinating, so complete, and I loved it. And I used it for many, many, many years. Not many, many years. many, many, many months. Almost 2 years now. But what was so beautiful about presuppositional apologetics is simply the fact that it actually gives you a foundation to your faith and basically just screams that God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary. Now, where is there the deficiency in this quote-unquote bulletproof approach? I believe the deficiency is its practical usage in actual apologetic circumstances. So, for example, I did a debate on a channel called the Atheist Roundtable a little while back. I debated a guy named Mike on there, and I used presuppositional apologetics. And what I recognize in retrospect is that all throughout the debate, though I think me and my friend Joshua Janier, we did a great job at pointing out the error of the atheistic thinking, the atheistic presuppositions that presuppose all the things that necessarily derive themselves from God. I think we did a great job at showing the folly, but what presuppositionalism fails to do is showing that the folly there leads to the reason that points to God on my end. And maybe that wasn't a great way to phrase it, but in other words, we expose that there's no justification for things like reason and logic in an atheistic framework, but it kind of stops there, as opposed to then showing why in our framework, because reason and logic exist, they reasons itself back to God. And this is where the Thomistic side comes in. I believe, like my post said, presuppositionalism gave me the justification for my reason. And this needs to be pointed out in every debate. We need to point out, you don't have a justification without God. However, if we stop there, we're not offering the apologetic that then proves that reason does indeed lead back to God. So when we point out there's no justification, we need to point out that our justification of God is provable through things like reason and logic, and that those things necessitate God because they themselves point to God. And this is what I think Thomistic theology and philosophy does so well. I believe that Aquinas' arguments, I just came across one the other day. I was watching a podcast where it's talking about the idea of imperfection and how imperfection within creation lends itself to show that God exists. And the argumentation is as follows, and I'm going to paraphrase and kind of simplify here, but the idea is anything that has potency, or anything that has the potential to change, to go from one thing. I am sitting right now, but I have the potential to stand. That's potency. Anything that has the ability to change is necessarily imperfect, because if it were perfect, it would not be able to change. And if it can change, it's not perfect. That's the idea. And so what does this show us? This shows us that all things in the world, they have potency. They have the ability to change, including the universe itself. And we are living proof of that. We are part of this universe. We change. The universe changes. Even scientific theories of evolution point out that there is changes. And so if there's change, there's imperfection. If there's imperfection, that cannot be the final thing. Another argument, existence. And existence is not inherent to the essence of something. And you'll often hear the argument used that unicorns, for example, they don't exist, but they have an essence. We can conceive of them. But just because we can conceive of something doesn't mean that existence is inherent to its essence. And furthermore, if something can cease to exist, then existence by definition cannot be part of its essence. Therefore, you need to keep going back and say, if I exist, existence isn't in my essence. I've derived it from somewhere else because I can cease to exist. And I came into being. And if I came into being and I can cease to exist, then existence has to derive from something else. Okay, so then we go, okay, my parents, their parents. And you can keep going back until you have to arrive at something or someone that has existence within it or his essence. And in this case, we're talking about the Christian God. God is existence. Existence is inherent to his essence. These are bulletproof proofs for the existence of God. Now, why would I not use that right away in an apologetic circumstance? The reason is, if somebody says to me, prove that God exists, and I automatically go, okay, here's the best way to understand it, I'm accepting the idea that there's such a thing as neutrality. That we can be neutral about this, that we can both kind of take a step back and look at God as though he's out there being judged by us. And I don't believe that we as Christians can do that, nor do I believe that the Bible teaches that we can do that. But what I do believe is that when we point out the folly of somebody else's worldview, we can give them an answer by pointing out not just the fact that we have a justification, but that the very things that they use, they themselves then point to that justification. I hope that makes sense. This is my understanding. This is my development. As I've been reading more Aquinas, I have just fallen head over heels in love with him. My goodness, he is the greatest mind that I've ever read. And a lot of people will disagree with me here, but I think that he even goes above and beyond Augustine when it comes to just pure intellect. He is just simply brilliant, and I love the man. So with that being said, I'm proposing presuppositional Thomism. Presuppositional in the sense that we address the presuppositions that different worldviews have. We address the fact that different worldviews cannot justify their claims and their use of things like logic and reason, their claims of morality. We need to address that, but then we need to show that ours does. We can't just say that it does. We need to show that it does. And we can show that it does by using things like Thomistic classical apologetics. Now, if we only use that, we wouldn't be pointing out that their worldview can't account. But if we only use presuppositionalism, we're pointing out that their worldview can't account without providing a robust apologetic for our own. So I believe that the greatest apologetic method out there is presuppositional Thomism. That is all I want to say, and I'm just going to restate what I said in my post. Presuppositionalism gave me a justification for my reason. Thomism gave me the glorious fruit of that reason. Brothers and sisters, let us recognize that God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary, but let us also show and admit that the reason that he has given us, by presupposing God, the reason he has given us can be used demonstrably to point back to his existence, for it attests to its creator. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. I would love feedback in the comment. I know that I have some people who are watching who are Thomists, some presuppositionalists. Let me know what you think in the comments. And with that, I'll talk to you guys next time.